Hello all. Today I am excited to welcome Mr. Ujjwal Jalgaonkar to Neural Networking with Converge. With a career spanning around 20 years in medical device R&D, Ujjwal has been instrumental in developing groundbreaking solutions for some of the most complex medical challenges. His expertise in neurovascular, cardiovascular, peripheral vascular, and surgical devices, coupled with his leadership in bringing Class 2 and Class 3 products to market, makes him a true industry veteran. Ujjwal is not only a skilled engineer but also a dedicated mentor who believes in fostering innovation and building high performing teams. Now that we know our guest very well, let's jump on to our first question. Can you walk us through your journey from a design intern to becoming vice president of research and development at BALT? What were some pivotal moments that you see in your career?
Good question, and I think I get that question more often than I would want. But I would start a little earlier than my design intern, because before that is one of the biggest career moves that I think pivotal moments in my career was making a decision to move to United States for higher education, which is how I then moved into a design intern role. And I think that made a big difference in how I look at things and how the exposure that I got. So that is the first pivotal moment. The second part, I would start with just giving a background on how I moved from where I was to my current role, and then I'll share a pivotal moment in that journey. Where I would start is after a design intern, I was doing my masters. I got an opportunity there. I started working as a design intern. I came back to school. I finished my graduation, and then during that time, I moved into another place in the country. I moved to Midwest, which is a colder place, and there it was a very fortunate moment that I went to Midwest, where the medical device industry is very prominent. That is one of the hubs of medical device development in United States and in the world. So I landed in a place which was ripe for this industry, or was a pioneer in this industry. And my initial entry into the job market was as an engineer in a technology industry, where it was a semiconductor industry. I was there, but that Midwest being a place where most companies were trying to get into medical device design and development, our company, where I joined and started as a semiconductor process engineer, was branching out into a device industry. They were trying to go into a less invasive monitoring system. I saw that as an opportunity to learn something new, so I requested them to be, if there was an opportunity. So I was moved into that role at that time. Following that, this was a startup environment where this company was getting into it. But some of the big names in the industry, like Boston Scientific, Medtronic, St. Jude at that time, Guidant at that time, were all headquartered in Minneapolis. So naturally, there used to be an opportunity and calls from the recruiters for anybody to, if the opportunity came up, and I would often get calls from this company. But I never thought of moving until a very personal experience of mine. A family member who had a cardiac event, and passed away very young. And that really was something that changed my mind to go into real core technology, medical device technologies. Because monitoring technologies was one part of it, but that was the pivotal moment in my career where I said, no, I want to be in this industry. And then I sought after these opportunities, and that's how I moved into a cardiology division and electrophysiology division of Boston Scientific, which was a big name company and one of the leaders in the industry. I worked there for 5 years. Following that, I was getting restless, wanted to do something new. I again went into a startup. I went into a startup that was in the surgical space, which was acquired by Daewoo or C.R. Bard at that time, and now that is acquired by Becton Dickinson. So I worked there in the startup, saw the being acquired part of it, and then from there I relocated to Southern California to Medtronic, and that relocation was another interesting career move, because Southern California is another hub for medical device, and there is neurovascular is companies have done a lot of development in that area. So I moved there, and I worked with Medtronic for 8 years there, following which I again went to a startup and then to BALT, where I am. And my career journey of where I am today has not been a very planned journey. I love what I do, and as the opportunity presented, I just took it. I would never say no. So I would be an exception if people plan their career. I am not somebody who planned. I do what I love, and that's where I am.
Thanks for putting this together, so we can see the passion oozing out of you, how that event really changed the things, and how you worked across spectrums, companies, products, divisions, so we can see the experience coming into play. So you have worked across various medical device sectors, like you mentioned, neurovascular, cardiovascular, peripheral vascular, and surgical. How do you adapt your approach when switching between these different areas, and how do you foster at the same time innovation and creativity, because you are in that R&D role and across your teams in these diverse sectors?
Very interesting and a very good question, I would say. As much as it from an outside in, it looks like you have moved industry or specialities, if you will. So unlike somebody who is a treating physician, right, a neurosurgeon or a cardiovascular surgeon, interventional cardio, where they are very deep into it, our knowledge, what is key to be an engineer in the medical devices development, is to understand the basic physiology and the anatomy of the things, and the interaction of that, of the external stimuli or external devices with those physiologic environment, right? Ultimately, we are not someone who is into the deeper understanding, which is why there are specialities. What we need to do is we are bringing technology to the devices. So as long as we have a decent anatomical understanding and the physiologic understanding, I think it's not that difficult to transfer skill sets, because what's the skill sets we bring to the table are more along what materials can be used are for these devices, what materials are biocompatible with the human body, what kind of regulatory requirements are that, and yeah, requirements change a little bit, but in general, at a core, the regulatory requirements are very similar. The testing methods are very similar. The preclinical work in the animal models are not, you will treat a different disease state, but it's not like fundamentally different regulatory pathway or the technologies that are used. In fact, sometimes I would say is that intravascular technologies versus surgical technologies or cardiovascular technologies, by that I mean the cardiac rhythm management, for example, right? That skill set is completely different than interventional cardiology for treatment of stenosis or into the vessels, right? Because there you are too much into the electronics and data collection and mapping and stuff like that, whereas in the vascular system you are more like a plumber and going into the vasculature and treating the disease in the vasculature. So it wasn't very difficult to transition in the vascular space between these technologies. In fact, it was more engaging. Over time, you want to be outside your comfort zone. So in fact, I found that to be a better path to keep changing and get a more wider perspective of the anatomy of the disease states.
Right. I think you've said a very, interesting observation, that you need to know the anatomy and physiology in order to be an engineer who is applying these technologies in the manufacturing of the medical devices. So that is something, an interdisciplinary thing, which I see is a skill set that you bring on the table. And speaking of interdisciplinary, we are in the age of AI.
Yes.
And AI is probably the most interdisciplinary thing,
Yes.
which is now getting what you say applied across sectors. And I'm sure that even the medical device manufacturing sector, or in general, somewhere in your work, you must have come across artificial intelligence or generative AI per se, with the rise of it. So do you foresee any potential applications in medical device design or prototyping, and what are the opportunities and risks to that?
Yeah, whatever you said is clearly true, and I think the technology is what has changed between when I started to work and now. Rapid, like the 90s saw the development of internet and more so the technologies that are access improved rapidly in those, right? You are able to get access to all the interdisciplinary knowledge without having to go to the library, and that has really helped. And now AI is the next level, because now even gathering that knowledge is becoming even faster interdisciplinary. So going back to the question of where my skill set is, I'm not an AI person. What I can share is how do, with my limited understanding of artificial intelligence, unlike you guys, what I would see is that how could that help me in developing new products, right? One of the areas where we see a lot is in the diagnostic. AI in the diagnostic is going to be the huge change, right? Right now we do a lot of development work and the physician treatments happening because of it's all radiology and diagnostic. They look at the images and they identify where is the problem, right? And that helps them decide the course of the treatment. Now those technologies are nothing but a radiologist reading the images and making a decision. AI is going to change that. I think there is already companies who have developed AI based software where the imaging is done when the CT scan or MRIs at the emergency centers, and the AI is able to collect that information and then give a first read of it to the physicians, and they get those images and preliminary diagnosis of like recommendation, if you will, of like what it could potentially be, and then the physician has to do a confirmatory role, right? So I see a lot of use of that AI diagnostic, and is a field which I can't say which is going to improve the workflow in the medical system. From a device perspective on that, AI is there are two ways I look at the device system. There are passive devices, medical devices, and then there are active, which are monitoring, stimulation, ablation devices, right? And then there are devices that are able to go up there and do some mechanical treatment, open up the vessel, fix up the broken vessel or aneurysm, right? So AI with the active devices like ICDs that are used for defibrillation, right? Those are monitoring, and then the algorithm is collecting that data actively and then able to produce a response to how alerting the patient or the physician, and then delivering the therapy accordingly, right? So that is the classic place where I think generative AI is going to collect more data and become more smarter and smarter. Same thing is going to happen with diabetes, right? There is these insulin monitors now. Now there is going to be automatic dosing. So right now, people who have diabetes, they have to monitor their food and what time they eat and how they spike their glucose. But now this monitoring the AI is, in my mind, is going to be able to figure that algorithm out and do some more predictively or proactively give the dosing before even the food, so the patient doesn't have to remember or anything. It learns from the pattern. So that's on the active devices side. On the passive devices, like where my experience has been for a long time, what I see is the passive devices are going to go from being passive to towards getting some systems of recording, data recording or monitoring, and which is like force sensing, flow sensing in the vasculature. If those sensors are implanted on this one and that data is collecting, that is going to be the next level of information gathering that is going to happen with the on the medical device, the passive devices side. Some of that is already started, and that combined with robotics is going to be the game-changing technologies. I think the first step is these passive devices becoming more active and recording so that they can record those things and they collect data. And the second stage is going to be such a rapid growth of adoption of these technologies, because the software is there. You want to build the platform, like the hardware platform needs to move up a little bit on the passive devices to be able to then implement all of these things which are unimaginable today. Like I can't believe, like, if we can monitor everything that is going on physiologically during the procedure acutely, it is a huge improvement that we'll see.
Do you see any risks on the adoption side of these devices? I'm sure you must have encountered during your testing of the medical devices many risks. So any anecdote on that you see from an AI side when it gets implemented?
It is a tough question, I would say, because I haven't thought about it like that. Typically, device malfunction is one piece, and then the user error or is another thing. What I see with robotics and the AI sensing capabilities, I think as much as, like, one clear example of this is a haptic feedback. Whenever a surgeon is cutting something, whenever a surgeon is inserting something, today, over years in his practice, 10, 12 years when he gets trained on it, he gets that sense of haptic feedback and how much force he can apply and not apply and all of that. Now, this is also very individual dependent, so there is a huge variability. Somebody like me or you, we might have a whole different perspective on the speed at which we do the procedures and the delicacy in which we do it in our own respective way. And I think that is something that needs to be, where are we going to draw that threshold? And one thing that I've already seen, one example I would say is that we have seen in the neurointerventional neurosciences, there are people, most physicians in the United States, or I wouldn't say most, but quite a few are dual trained. So they do surgery, and they are trained in open surgery, open skill-based surgery, but they also are trained in interventional procedures, which is going through the vessels, right? And then there are people, physicians who are trained as a radiologist and then an interventional, a neurologist and an interventional procedures, right? So they are dual trained in that one. And what you will see is that the comfort level and the way a neurosurgeon would treat interventionally is maybe slightly different. As a observer, I would say, you could sense that these guys have a little bit more comfort because they know, they have touched those vessels, they have seen that mass, they know what it is, right, on a day-to-day basis. So they have a little different preference in how fast they can go or how much force they would apply in which anatomy they are, because as you go in delicate anatomies, it changes a lot. So where do you then, AI takes the feedback, and what kind of haptic thresholds do you provide in the robotic systems or in those systems is going to be very interesting. And I think it's going to take a lot to learn and develop that one.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where I come now to the question that the use cases that you were saying, but in order to manufacture the products, I'm sure those are very challenging tasks to manufacture products regarding some of these use cases. So can you share an example of particularly challenging product development process you have led and how you overcame the obstacles?
One of the most important things that I have learned in my career of 20 years in device development is that we do physiology and human like until you use the product in clinical, it's you're still done. You can do a lot of testing, but the real test is when you go into the humans. Okay, so we have over years learned animal models to do the testing of how the devices will be used. We have done bench models to do the testing. We do a ton of safety testing. We have regulatory requirements and standards that mandate you to do that. But ultimately what happens is that you cannot create a diseased anatomy. You can, like, it's very challenging if we do animal work, but how do I get an animal who is 80-year-old patient with all the stenosis in the vessel and tortuous and the difficult access and all of that? So that's not very practical. So until the device goes into the human trials, that's where the challenge is. So the key thing, I don't see a challenge in going from concept to a developed device that on bench and preclinical works. I have learned more in the phase when we start to roll off this. And typical, I think, in the other industries, the beta version and alpha version, what we do is we typically start with limited market release or early feasibility studies, where our clinical trials that have much more guardrails around commercialization, and that is when we learn a lot. And use cases, examples would be a lot, but I think that is too big of a topic. But I think that phase is the key phase. What do you learn, and how do you adopt or make sure that you are not letting another, even a single product that is not good out in the field?
Yeah, I can imagine the hardship that you need to undergo to solve the production level bugs.
Yeah.
Those who come, I'm putting it the name as bugs because I come from a software background, but I can really relate to what you say, how you undergo it and how do you do the clinical trials. You must be getting a feedback report, and there is a cycle on which you need to act and then get it again.
Yeah.
So now coming to the future of this medical device manufacturing industry as a whole, so what are those 2-3 areas or what you say focus that you see for the next 5-10 years, where the industry is really gonna have the game-changing moments?
So that question, I would rephrase it for myself. I would say, rather than manufacturing, I would give a more encompassing term like operations, right? As we do the initial development, operations is a big part of it, which includes manufacturing but also supply chain. And I think that is where a lot of early adoption of AI technologies is what I feel. Right now, the supply, like typical product development, if I have a product that is used for treatment of aneurysms, for example, right, there could be a product line that has 200 SKUs, and a physician, until he starts treating the patient, really doesn't know which one of those he is going to use during the, which 5 of those, which 2 of those, which one of those out of 250 he is going to use that, right? So now, looking at from an operations standpoint and a commercial standpoint, if I have to keep all of those 50 sizes and in enough quantities at every hospital, it's a enormous complex operations research problem, OR problem, on how do you balance the inventory versus what you are making and how much you are making, because medical devices have a limited shelf life, like 3 years, 2 years, and all that. So it's not like if you leave it on the shelf that it has a very 10-year shelf life. So there is a risk of it going out of the shelf life and then you lose that product. So the first place where I think AI could help is to figure out the high runners, the right optimization that is needed based on the historic data, use patterns. Just like we talked about imaging, and the physician can look at the images and they look thousands and thousands of images, but when they know a patient is looking for, the symptoms are telling that this guy has a stroke, then he's really looking at that particular area and
Yeah.
what he knows based, and that is what his focus is. But in the periphery, there is enough data set which AI type of analysis, imaging analysis can tell and pick up.
Pick up.
Same thing happens here right now in this inventory planning and all of that. People who are manufacturing and doing supply chain, they are looking at what is the high runner, and they can look at, okay, how do I optimize the low hanging fruits, if you will, right? But I'm sure there are opportunities outside of it to optimize it a lot. And with AI, I think that is a huge opportunity, which is a huge cost saving, not just to the industry but to the overall healthcare system.
Because it will add to the patients as well. They
Yes.
would have it at a reduced cost.
And the availability becomes more, right?
More.
If the burden is there, you are never going to be like, oh, I wanted this size but I don't have it now. So that is a healthcare problem, that it is a much important implementation that I think in next 5 to 10 years, the adoption of that and some solution, smart people like you are going to come up with something there and have that. So that's one area I would say. From the manufacturing side, I also see that definitely in high volume products, medical devices are unlike iPhones and unlike of some of the retail goods. We are not manufacturing them in millions and millions. So but there are some commodity devices like syringes and some things where I do think that these type of optimizations of the how do we manufacture it, what is the recipe, is this, if I have a raw material that has this properties, how do I process it through injection molding? Right now it's this engineers with years and years of experience, and they have figured that out, and they have little bit of cheat sheet of their own. But I'm sure there is a missing data there, that the algorithms from AI is going to, if this data is available, that we are going to catch that. So that would be another area which I would think would be ripe next after the supply chain, which in my limited experience I think it's really ripe for
the
AI.
Right. I think this was great food for thought, both for us as well as the viewers, for sure. The areas that you mentioned, talked about your journey, and also you talked about like where AI is gonna get applied as an industry whole. What are the benefits of it? What are the risks of it? So thank you so much, Ujjwal, for spending time with us and taking us through this medical device industry, which not what you say many viewers are familiar about. We utilize the devices. We know that someone's like the example you gave of your relative, some relative has gone angioplasty, so they know there is a stent being put in, or someone has had a stroke, like you said about the neurovascular devices. But generally the viewers are not aware how these devices are, how they manufactured, how they are manufactured, what are the challenges to it, how like you talked about, what are the problems of the manufacturers, the supply chain thing that we mentioned. So thank you for coming here and highlighting those things for our viewers. Thank you very much.
No, this is perfect, and I think you brought up a good thing, is that these are the things that the user, they might have them in their body but they never see it. This is not a retail thing, right? Even in pharmacy, you are the one who are taking your pills every day or not. But these are the things that medical devices, somebody else is using it on you, right? So yes, the awareness is not there, but this is where it needs to be. Like, we need to be aware of what is happening and what we are working on. So, and I'm glad that Konverge AI is actually focusing on the medical side, medical device side of it. Sometimes we feel left out with everything going on with all this Facebook stuff and all of that. So yeah, it's really good to see that there is interest from the tech people to help the device industry.
Definitely. Thank you very much.